This is the scene at Albeit. The first of the Iranian armor has reached the outskirts of the village. Although the tank barrage has diminished somewhat, it is still the source of wanton destruction. With the exception of the militant safe house, the entire east sector of this ancient settlement has now been reduced to rubble. Conditions on the ground can only be described as tenuous. The Marines are holding on by their very fingertips. Stay tuned for more updates, as fate allows. This is CyberNet reporting.
The time is 03:29 hours. This is the situation. Having thwarted the advances of a substantially more powerful foe, the defenders of Albeit have succeeded in barring passage through the land conveyance bottleneck. However, time and favor are running out on the Marines of 4th LAR. Despite the indignity of being rebuffed by a mere reconnaissance unit, the Iranians have achieved battlefield superiority via the systematic destruction of virtually every heavy weapon in the garrison's arsenal. Too fatigued and too few in number to engage in any action other than self-protection, the intractable Leathernecks face the final enemy onslaught with little more than a collection of small arms. As a new day dawns, so too has their moment of truth. Having usurped the Wadi barrier and now free to roam the West Plain, the lone wolf T-62 renews its attack on the rear flank of Albeit by removing the last section of wall impairing line of sight to the village core and Coyote 4. In a premeditated attempt to draw the tank's attention away from the crippled LAV, the ousted crew of MTVR-1 dashes across the compound directly between the Predator and its prey. Taking the bait, the T-62 chases the trio with coaxial machine gun fire. Unscathed, the transport crew scurries into the ruins of a nearby domicile, where the unrequited tankers continue to stalk this white rabbit with cannon fire. However, due to a sharp angle of attack, the shell impacts short of the rubble pile, producing a thick cloud of dust and debris. Taking advantage of the drifting blind, the 3 Marines dart forward into the West Pitch Trench, where they ready themselves and their anti-tank weapons for their assailants' approach. Although partially concealed behind the wreck of Coyote 2, Coyote 4 is devoid of smoke canisters and a sitting duck before the rampaging T-62. However, the daring exploit of the MTVR crew has afforded the LAV the time and opportunity to repay the favor. As the tank approaches, chain gun fire riddles its turret. Their targeting optics disabled at a critical moment, the T-62's point-blank offensive is suddenly stymied. Taking evasive action to save their tank, the Iranians withdraw from the fight, unaware that their static prey has just expended the last of its AP rounds. On the opposite side of the settlement, the 2 sniper teams abandon the east trench line in an attempt to retrace their steps back into a village that is literally disintegrating behind them. With small arms activity from the Bastion now sharply curtailed due to their presence, and enemy armor on the verge of trespass, the marksmen are left with no option other than to recoil. To the immediate south, the toothless T-62 presses home its bid to enter Albeit from across the land bridge, despite possessing automatic weapons capability only. Detecting Team Snake's naked migration, the tank opens up with both coaxial and pintle machine gun fire. Miraculously, the 3-man section scampers through the hail of lead, a bit shaken, but no worse for wear. Intent on mowing down the defenseless Marines, the vehicle reaches the village threshold, completely oblivious to the infantry threat in the trenches to either side. As if on cue, both Alpha and Charlie teams begin pitching hand grenades into the tracks of the slow-moving vehicle. The ensuing series of explosions jam idlers and damage bogey wheels, resulting in the metal beast becoming stranded at the very gate of its objective. In a desperate effort to render assistance to their beleaguered cohorts, the Wadi scouts and armor crest the depression to intervene, albeit neither the No. 3 tank nor the BMP is operating with a fully functional weapons system. Their emergence not only arouses the fighting spirit of Bravo Team, it initiates the first man-portable anti-tank attack of the battle. A single-shot weapon with a shaped charge, the Law is an updated version of a Vietnam-era rocket launcher capable of penetrating most armor plating. Compelled to target frontal armor, the initial warheads each breach the hull of their respective vehicles, causing internal damage. In doubt as to the fate of the T-62, Bravo Team attacks its turret ring with a subsequent rocket, thereby putting an end to the aged vehicle's service life. Cognizant that they are at the mercy of close-quarter infantry attack and horrified by the prospect of perishing within their iron coffins, the Iranian reservists abandon their disabled AFVs straight into the gun sights of 2nd Platoon. A combination of precision M16 and grenadier fire inundate the 3 hapless crews. The end result of the skirmish at the south perimeter is a blow felt by the entire Iranian task force.
وكانت محاولتنا لاستخدام الكشاف والمدرعات الاحتياط للتحقيق في دفعات قرية.
Our attempt to use the scouts and reservist armor to probe the village's southern defenses was a disastrous affair. Enemy infantry, hidden in the ditch surrounding the settlement, dispatched every soldier and vehicle involved in the action. Not even suppressive fire from our heavy machine guns could protect those scouts trying to withdraw from the wadi, in order to connect up with the last mobile tank of the South Prong. At this point, the American interlopers had destroyed no less than half of our original contingent of tanks. Worse yet, only 6 of the remaining 10 tanks were capable of transit. In addition, grazing fire from the village interior was harassing our infantry on the sand dune, effectively keeping them at bay. With the exception of a lone reservist tank, the final assault into Al-Bazir was now the sole responsibility of the men in armor of the East Prong.
In a climactic final measure of contribution, Fox 1 attempts to strike a partially exposed T-62 on the south ridge of Sultan's Dagger. This time, however, the missile loses target lock and impacts the reverse slope, barely missing the Shilka in the process. Switching target to another hold-down tank on the opposite flank of the medieval bastion, the ensuing and final missile in the LAV's inventory likewise fails to track its quarry. Impacting the fortress's west wall, a segment of the deteriorating battlement is demolished. Deplete of warheads and having drawn the attention of the enemy's heavy machine guns, Fox 1 withdraws. Although their final foray is inconclusive, the AT platform has succeeded in provoking the retraction of the MV tanks from the ridgeline, temporarily lessening the overall threat to the village. Capitalizing on this momentary reduction in Iranian firepower from atop the rise, the Marine Heavy Weapons Command Team races for the East Trench Line. With Law rockets in hand, they deploy for action against a tank assault that is most certainly brewing. Having just exited the East Trench, the pair of sniper teams safely transition the open compound and re-enter the town hall and freight office in order to re-establish an operational base set atop their former haven. Upon arrival, they immediately gain line of sight on the conglomeration of Iranian ground troops casually navigating the Wadi Depression. From their rooftop vantage point, they commence sniping the unwary soldiers. Only marginally successful, the attack prompts their weary prey to pick up the pace and dash for cover further forward the dry wash. Such conspicuous activity garners the attention of the enemy heavy machine guns within the citadel, which began to assail the Marines, albeit blindly, from extreme range. In their own defense, Snake and Mongoose turn their scopes onto the distant bastion and scan its facade for the threat. Locating muzzle flash coming from a 5th-story window, it is Coyote 4 that actually answers the challenge. Traversing turret, the LAV comes to the aid of their compatriots by peppering the aperture with a volley of high-explosive rounds, therein purging the gun crew. Turning his sights onto the balcony 1 level higher, Mongoose acquires the 2nd heavy machine gun, yet ultimately resorts to collecting a lesser target of opportunity. Now the sole survivor of 1st Platoon, the immobile command tank on the lip of the Wadi, joins forces with the equally inert No. 2 tank of 3rd Platoon in an effort to silence the defensive fire originating from the village's standing structures. In both cases, the attacks render punishing results. Not only does another unoccupied building ultimately fail and collapse, the Mark 19 survivors located on the only perimeter building still erect suffer 3 more casualties. Although this occurrence significantly reduces the available firepower capable of assailing the dry wash, it steals the resolve of the 2 snipers in pursuing their specialized function. Gaining a fleeting glimpse of an RPK gunner, Snake skillfully dispatches the soldier and promptly renews his target watch. As for Mongoose, he and his team have now come under fire from the heavy machine gun located on the 6th floor of the Citadel. In response, Coyote 4 targets the source of the tracer rounds and summarily pounds the aggressor into submission. Perhaps the most significant activity taking place on the battlefield is occurring at opposite ends of the desert floor, astride Albeit. Having been repelled by the damaging attack of Coyote 4, the Lone Wolf T-62 once again swings wide of the village. Angling for the western approaches of the all-important gravel-top road, this action effectively blocks Albeit's defenders from any possibility of retreat. Meanwhile, the headquarters tank of the MV Company has crossed under the treacherously soft terrain of the North Sands and, quite prudently, reduces speed in order to avoid burying themselves in the shifting silica. While the T-62 continues course to the north flank of the battlefield, the infantry already on station there continue to deploy abreast the undulating dunes. Having reached 1080G, the Lone Wolf pursues its attack on the empty troop transport idling outside the northwest anterior wall. Virtually blind, the tank requires a second attempt with its main gun in order to achieve its aim, but nevertheless KOs the vehicle before beginning a cautious transition up the thoroughfare towards the village. Too tentative to unbutton and reveal themselves, the crew is limited to manual bore sighting and thus struggles to re-establish visual contact with Coyote 4. Ultimately, the trundling T-62 locates the languishing LAV, but misses its mark from point-blank range. For Captain Ricks, such fortune is merely provisional.
Despite the dire circumstances of the unequal struggle and our growing casualty count, it was vital that I maintain situational awareness and pursue a reasonable course of action. If not for the mission, then for the sake of my men. The enemy ground troops were beginning to tighten the noose from both the Wadi and the fringes of the desert sands. Even a small group of scouts felt confident enough to bow down the exposed face of a nearby dune in order to test our forward defenses, which by this time were virtually non-existent. Everywhere within the perimeter, my troops were taking action to counter the maneuvering of the Iranians, even though much of this pursuit was perilous from both the standpoint of enemy fire and localized hazards. There was no escaping the fact that we were totally isolated and unlikely to survive to see the dawn. I have to admit, there was only one thing that kept me hopeful of salvaging the situation. That being a communique from battalion, advising us that help was on the way. As I scanned a battlefield littered with combat debris and rife with imposing enemy activity, my heart suddenly raced. We had won the battle of time itself. Deliverance was on the near horizon.
With photojournalist Macro Lens, this is CyberNet reporting. From our location here along the north perimeter, just outside the last remnants of the stone barrier surrounding Albeit, it is difficult to assess the outcome of the recent skirmish at the south gate. From all indications, it appears as though the Marine scouts have momentarily stemmed the enemy's assault into the settlement. It's plain to see that the majority of the combat is now focused easterly, towards Sultan's Dagger Ridge and the Wadi Akaret. However, there seems to be new activity taking place due west of the village. My cameraman and his escort have left the cover of our trench to investigate. It's a distinct possibility that Iranian armor has severed the singular strand of traversable road leading in and out of the area. If this is indeed the case, then our rear flank has been compromised and we are completely cut off. Of course, this is mere speculation, but... Mac, are you guys okay? Can you hear me? Mac.
As if straight from the archives of a serial western, the eager ears of the Marine scouts perk up like the senses of an anxious group of homesteaders beset by a band of marauding renegades amidst a foreboding and desolate plain. Piercing the vociferous din that is the soundtrack of unremitting combat, the crackle and squawk of the unit's comm sets convey a message that is no less heartening than the trumpet of a distant cavalry bugle sounding the charge. With a trebled timbre, the voice of an infantry lieutenant commandeers the radio frequency with the words,
Keystone Cop, this is Party Crasher. We are at the back door. Do you copy?
Having disembarked from their carriers a few hundred yards shy of the field of battle, the men of 3rd Platoon, Company D, 1st Battalion 4th, assemble within the inconspicuous bowels of the Wadi Akaret and begin their transition to the battle zone. On their immediate flank, spanning the desert floor in line abreast combat formation, is the heavy armor of 1st Platoon, 1st Tank Battalion. The only other U.S. ground forces in the region of the Iranian incursion not impeded by the blocking force north of Baghdad, these two units represent the key to the outcome of this desperate holding action. For the Marines of 4th LAR, the worm has turned. The morning's first light is also the dawn of a new phase of battle, one that promises salvation for the valiant. You're watching Tales of Virtual Combat on His Story International.